All right, I want to talk with you today. If you're a physical therapist and you want to learn about RTM, right? So a couple weeks ago, I got on a call with Jerry Durham. We were talking about the number one single biggest mistake that physical therapists are making when it comes to monitoring, actually implementing RTM. And the number one mistake that I see when I meet with, clinics around the country is that they are adopting this digital home exercise program, right? There's a lot of them out there. We don't have to name them. And they're adding their patients to the home program digitally, which is great, but they're not actually doing the monitoring time, right? So they're capturing the tech codes and they're not actually monitoring the patient and having a relationship. The monitoring is actually the time you can get reimbursed for having a relationship with the patient outside of patient care time, right? So we even did an analysis with a large EMR company, maybe the largest, and 99% of the RTM codes in 2024 were the 98975 and the 98977. Only 1% of the codes that were submitted were the actual time of monitoring. And I think that's going to ruin it for everybody, right? That's going to ruin it because the insurance company is going to say, well, hey, you're not getting the outcomes that we expected. It's not helping the patient because you're not actually doing anything besides giving them a home program, which is what you've always been doing. And so that was a couple weeks ago we were talking about that. Now I had a great opportunity this morning. We hire remote PTAs around the country to actually do the monitoring for companies because they don't have time or the therapists don't like doing it. And we had our first opportunity to interview a remote PTA who worked at another company. So another large RTM company, I would say the largest. I won't have named them. And as we're interviewing them, we're trying to find out, why are you leaving that company? Why did you quit there? What did you not like? And it was really interesting. And so some of the things that she said to me were, well, to my partner, were they were very unorganized. When she would call the patients, so there's a requirement to actually make a phone call or a video conference with the patient once a month outside of patient care time. And the whole point of this conversation when you're doing RTM is to talk to the patient, support them, and find out what their barriers are to why they're not doing as much of the homework as they should be, right? We already know that 70% of patients nationwide do not do their home program when they're in PT. And we know that if they did more of that, they would get better, right? That's the whole point of this. And so the monitoring time is communicating with the patient about their lack of compliance. And what we do is we take a motivational interviewing strategy. So we train our providers to motivationally interview, which is a skill set that you can learn and read about, which most healthcare providers are terrible. In fact, there is a motivational interviewing for healthcare providers book. And it talks, the first two chapters talk about how terrible healthcare providers are at actually listening to patients, actively listening, not informing them, but actively listening and then guiding them down the path through encouragement and asking the right questions to help the patient internally motivate themselves. They come to the conclusion that this is important, not us telling them that. And so anyways, this remote provider who's been working for about a year, she was like, well, it's not good because the patients don't even know that I'm going to be calling them, right? So that means that the clinic staff it's a team effort, right? So that means that the therapist who set up the patient with the home program, who's working with the patient in the clinic, really isn't talking with the patient about, hey, we're monitoring this data. We really want you to do this. There is going to be one of our team members that reach out to you once a month to have a conversation with you and try to help you understand how important this is. And that's not happening, right? And so this provider says, that they didn't even know I'm going to call. So that's a lack of like training and buy-in from the clinic who's implementing RTM. Then the feedback from most of the patients were that the patient was given the app and no education or support on how to use the app. So they're not even using it because they don't feel confident in how to get into the app. And then one of the biggest things that we want our remote providers to do is to talk with the supervising therapist, the therapist who's working with the patient 2 or 3 days a week in the clinic. We want to have a relationship with them as well so that we can tell them how the patient's doing, how did the phone call go, what does the data show us when we're monitoring. And this PTA said, the therapist, when I send messages to them, about how the patient is doing. It might be a red flag. Patient might have complained on the phone about how bad their home program is going, or they might have some red flag medical issue, a blood clot or something like that, infection, that these therapists that she was working for essentially as the remote provider, they're not even responding to her messages, right? And so there again, there's really no direction. There was no team effort between this company's remote provider and the physical therapists who are working directly with the patient. It's like they're in two separate silos. They're not talking to each other. And again, that's why we talk about, like, you got to do RTM right, right? You have to do it right. And what right means is that this is like a patient engagement tool. So we're trying to develop a stronger relationship with the patient. And that's not just the remote PTA who's doing the work, the monitoring time. It's the in-clinic staff, it's the front desk, it's everybody. And that's what we try to that's what our company's all about. So MovementRX, we provide the software, we have a team of remote providers, but more importantly, we train your staff and we get everybody on the same page so that there's a relationship, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think, not only if we do this wrong, we're going to ruin it for the patients, right? Because we're not actually doing it right. We're not monitoring. We're not having conversations that are difficult. We're not motivational interviewing, but we're also going to ruin it for the providers. Like, PTAs and PTs aren't going to want to do this. And so I think we really need to think through what these companies are pushing and shoving to us about their technology. And this is great. It's integrated. I hear integrated all the time. Integrate with the EMR. None of that matters. What matters is, are you doing it the right way or not? Are you doing this to try to help the patient have a better relationship with the clinical staff and get better outcomes? And yeah, you get a financial benefit from that. If you're not doing it the right way, you're going to ruin it for the patient. You're going to ruin it for the providers, and no one's going to want to do this. So just food for thought.